curiosity is a funny thing. It makes us aware of all sorts of connections that without it, we simply wouldn't find. Like being a lover of words, like Tim is a lover of words, can lead to all sorts of crazy, weird things. That's many of those things that Tim usually does, right? And our guest today is also a lover of words. And one day he heard a word that really intrigued him. And that word was synesthesia. And what did it mean to him?
Anesthesia, no sensation. Synesthesia, joined or coupled sensations. So I had this word synesthesia in the back of my mind. And here's this guy that says, when I taste an intense flavor, it sweeps down my arm and I feel weight, shape, and texture. And I thought, oh, that's it. His senses. Oh, synesthesia. Yeah, that's what that is. So those dots fell into place.
And that experience of having those dots fall into place put a medical condition that had only been sparsely studied in neuroscience back on the map. It was, yeah, you guessed it, synesthesia.
The guest in our episode today is Richard Cytowic. He's the author of Your Stone Age Brain in the Screen Age, Coping with Digital Distraction and Sensory Overload. Richard helped ignite the contemporary study of synesthesia, which is a perceptual phenomenon in which one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experiences in another sensory or cognitive pathway. Got that?
Okay, that was a mouthful, Tim. Okay. Let's try that in maybe English. Can we do that? All right. People with synesthesia, which I can never pronounce, right, may experience colors when they listen to music. They might see shapes when smelling certain scents, or they could perceive tastes when looking at words. Any one of those or some other different combinations. It's really fascinating stuff. But we didn't spend all of our conversation on this interesting condition.
No, not at all. In fact, that was just a sliver of our conversation. We spent the bulk of our time talking about Richard's work as a neuroscientist and his observations about how our brains, which were developed in a Stone Age world, operate in this new digital world.
Yeah, and we also talked about emotional intelligence and how it is vitally important to both our species and to you as an individual.
Yeah, Richard also had some very pointed words about brain energy and multitasking.
You mean the myth of multitasking, Tim. It's a myth, right?
Because there really is no such thing as doing two things at once to your brain.
Yeah, our brains don't operate that way.
No.
But you're going to have to listen to our conversation to get the 411 and all of that.
Did you just use like a 20th century reference there, Captain Old School?
What 411? Doesn't everybody know what 411 means? It's like it's where you dial on that phone to get the information. 411.
Yeah,
didn't you dial 411 as a kid? I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, my kids would have no clue what that is.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Okay. But speaking of listening, we have other ways that you can check out Behavioral Grooves. We have a YouTube page with lots of video-based podcasts that are as fun to watch as they are to listen to.
I don't know if everyone would agree that that's really a great idea.
Why? Maybe not. Okay, maybe not. But we'd love it if you check it out and do what you do best. Hit the subscribe button on that YouTube page if you do enjoy it and like seeing our funny faces up on the video screen as we're laughing away here.
Yeah, we actually would really love that subscription thing. Yes. Okay. But right now, we'd like to invite you to sit back with a strong pour of synesthesia to pick up our conversation with this brilliant neuroscientist. Now, we started with Richard by asking him about nature versus nurture, or more specifically, what's the difference in our ability to adapt our brains over generations versus neuroplasticity, which happens more on the fly?
Much of our behavior is wired through our genetics. and this is why synesthesia is so fascinating. A tiny change in your DNA completely alters the way you perceive the world. I mean, that's really mind-blowing. But much of our behavior is in our intellect is determined by genetics. So, for example, smart parents usually have smart children, whereas dumber parents, uneducated ones, have pretty dumb kids. And part of that is genetic, but it's also the environment to which they're exposed. So if the parents don't read or play a musical instrument or do some sort of artistic thing, then that's not going to rub off on the kids as well. So a huge amount is, I mean, over, I would say 70% is genetic. And it's wired into our DNA, and then the rest is the environment, which is why identical twins can grow up to be different. They have different interests, etc. So that shows you that there are forces in the environment that do shape how you turn out to be. I think it gets back. So let's take a kid who's in a public school that's not very good, and the teacher could care less and all that. So, there's a story out today of a girl that graduated and she can't read, and so she's 12 years old and she can't read, and she's suing the school because they didn't teach her anything. Versus, let's take somebody who goes to a Waldorf school where they don't have phones until you're 12 years old, and they're engaged in hands-on work, sculpting, clay work, felt work, etc. And they're also exposed to other musical instruments, etc. These kids turn out to be pretty interesting because they are interested in so much that's going on around them. I mean, I don't know how anybody can say that they're bored. I don't understand that at all, because there's so much to do, and I can't tackle even the tiniest fraction of it in my lifetime. So I haven't been bored since, I don't know, I was 3 years old or something, I suppose.
That's an interesting idea there, because when we've had this conversation with other guests about this idea of being bored, and I've brought up this element, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Is, when I was a kid, when all of us were kids, right? You would go for a car ride, and what do you just have to sit and watch the window out. There's not, you don't even necessarily get to pick the radio station, because dad's up in front driving and you're sitting in the back seat, and you don't like the music. So what do? You have to come up with different things. Today, my kids, most people, they have some device, and so they are listening to either their own music, they're playing a game, they're doing something. There's always a stimulation, and so they don't know how to go, all right.
And they're not experiencing the countryside the landscape as it's going by,
Right. And just this idea of all right, so I got to keep my mind occupied. All right. So what are people doing in that house? How did that, why are there a group of trees over there, and there's a cornfield here, and are, do the deers come out? And, all the things that you just happen when you start, being bored. Because
my sister and I were the same way. Is that my father, we would sing in the car, or play games with the roadside. Route 309. What does that suggest, etc.? Who lives there? Or the history of I grew up in New Jersey, so we were steeped in colonial and Indian history. So there's always things to talk about.
Yeah. It's a fascinating
My father
thing.
took us to interesting places up and down the New York to Philadelphia axis. I mean, unlike it. We were very unusual. Other kids in my grammar school, they never went out to a restaurant. We went out, at least a couple times a week.
Yeah.
So
wow.
And it was so here's how you behave around adults. And you'd enter the restaurant, and you could see the patrons they're free, like deer in the head, oh my God, kids, they're going to start screaming. And invariably, then the owner would come over and say to my father, the people would say, your children are so well behaved. And the owner would say, Doc, your kids are welcome here anytime at all.
Yeah.
So, and we'd be dressed up like a little lady and gentleman. I'd have on a blazer and a tie.
Yeah.
and we cleaned our plates because it was delicious, and it was fun to go out.
Did. Yeah.
So how much of this is the when the critics say, well, this is just old guy talk, this is just a bunch of old guys sitting around talking about the good old days, and wouldn't it be better then? Your argument in the book is it's not just that, right?
I mean, yeah, we're all old guys, but I mean, yes, it's not just that. Not just that at all. And you just have to look around and see how things are. And you ask, well, why are things so much different than they were a couple generations ago, even 2 generations ago, when grandparents were much more involved? Well, of course, we had much more nuclear families back then. Divorce wasn't such a major. I mean, I don't know what the percentage of divorces are, but I think most kids grow up in split households these days. It's got to be stressful.
Yeah. From your viewpoint. So again, we're talking with Richard about his book, Your Stone Age Brain in the Screen Age, came out in October of 2024. In your opinion, do social apps have a net positive or a net negative impact on us? And the premise was that this, they'd bring the world closer together, and that they'd have this element.
That's what Mark Zuckerberg insists.
Yeah.
But it's such an oxymoron, social media. There is absolutely nothing social about it. It separates people. It isolates them. It makes them feel lonely. It makes them, anxious over FOMO, fear of missing out. So I think on the whole, they are a net loser.
Okay.
A negative force. Now, that said, this device in my hand here, whereas they were here, this is better than Star Trek. I mean, by many, many times better than Star Trek. And it's fantastic. It's a great tool. My whole life is in there. It's made me, and now we have ChatGPT, which I've been using, and it's like, wow. But it's one thing to use this as a tool, and it's another to become addicted by it. And I'll tell you a story, is that for a long time, my late husband and I had track phones to make the occasional outgoing call, like who was going to call us? We were both retired, etc. So why bother? We were in New York once, in a city that's set up on a grid, for goodness sake. And we were trying to find an address. And we were going up and down the block, couldn't find it. And at that point, all the public telephones and phone books had been ripped out. So we just looked at each other and said, we have got to get an iPhone, if only for the maps. So we got one, okay? And within the first day of playing with this new thing, it's like, wow, this is really impressive. And then I said, oh my God, I see why it's so addictive.
Yeah.
And maybe I could see this because this is my profession. I think about how we think, and I'm aware of positive and intermittent reinforcement. Now, most people, they're just scrolling through TikTok or whatever. If you're at the dinner table and you eat, even at Thanksgiving, to the point where you're stuffed, you say, okay, I've had enough. I don't even have room for Jell-O. I'm done. Well, with the endless scroll, where's the signal to stop? There isn't. There is never one. So you keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Now, these tech companies have hired reams of psychologists and behavioral economists to devise ways to keep us on their platform as long as possible. They know that there's only 1,440 minutes in a day. And so they fight ruthlessly for our eyeballs. Because why? Because of the money behind it. So we all know about Pavlov's dog. You ring the bell, the dog salivates. You don't even need to give it the piece of meat anymore. That's classical conditioning. Now you take what's called positive intermittent reinforcement, which is what a slot machine is that you get a reward unpredictably only some of the time. And that makes that kind of reinforcement extremely powerful. And so I compare, the phone, if you're able to give it up for a while, that's good. But as soon as you go back to it, you've just reinforced the addiction. It's like a dog begging at the table. Okay, so you give it a morsel of food, and it looks at you with this endearing look, because that's what dogs have evolved to interact with humans. Okay, so the next time it comes up and you give it another piece of food, then you decide, all right, I've had enough of this, and you decide no more, and so you don't. So the dog will sit there and look at you with begging and treats, just like a 2 or 3-year-old will. If you told it no, well, that the kid already knows that no doesn't mean no. It might mean maybe or not yet, and so they keep at you until you're ready to give in. Well, if you keep refusing to give the dog or the child the piece of meat that it's begging for, you will eventually, over a few weeks, extinguish that reinforcement, that addiction. Okay. But woe to the animal owner or the parent who gives in just once. All right. Because if you give in just once before this is extinguished, you have reinforced it. You have made things infinitely worse, and now you're almost never going to be able to extinguish it.
Yeah.
So you're not a Luddite. You're not here advocating.
No. Oh my God,
no
no.
one should. Yeah.
I know how to write computer programs. Yeah. So,
so how do we thread this needle? How do we? What's your advice to listeners to say, okay, avoid addiction, but it's not like you have to, bury your phone in the backyard and never use it again either.
well, I think we have to admit that the power that these devices have over us, that's the first step. And then developing some sort of emotional self-awareness and emotional awareness of, look what this thing is doing to me. Rather than being defensive and say, oh no, I'm not addicted, I can stop anytime. I mean, that's the classical line of any addict, I can stop anytime I want. And my answer to that is, really? Well, let's try. Put your phone or your bottle or your whatever down for 5 days. Can you go 5 days without looking at it or taking a hit or a drink? And if you can't, well, you've got a problem. And many people find that they simply cannot. I just read an article this morning about stock market gambling is now the latest thing that's taking off. And so your one addiction, like your smartphone addiction, can move over to other things like excessive eating, gambling, compulsive shopping, etc.
Yeah.
And these men, they're trading in secret. They don't want their family to know. They're losing tens of millions of dollars, and they can't stop. And so they're now ending up in Gamblers Anonymous rooms, because they have this behavioral addiction. So that's Richard, the distinction. This is a behavioral addiction.
And Richard, is one of the things, given the phone and how ubiquitous it is in different pieces, but it also serves many different functions. So like this idea of giving up social media and maybe some of that, but I have to use the phone because I do email. That's where my email is on it. Or it's a phone. And that makes it harder,
that makes
right?
it difficult is we're using it for more than one function.
Right.
The last thing people do with it is actually make phone calls.
Yes,
young people in particular, they don't want to talk on the phone; they want to text.
Yes.
It's the same way with doorbells. If you ring a doorbell, they freak out. They don't know what to do. Oh my God, there's somebody at the door. They're expecting a text that says, "We're here outside."
Yeah.
So
I know. It's crazy.
So yes, we use the phone for many different things. So it's hard to give a blanket thing. But if social media is really doing you in, if you find yourself spending so much time on TikTok, then delete the app. I would say you can always download it again, and most people do. They realize that they can't live without it. Fear of missing out. They got to see what's going on. But if social media is your Achilles heel, then focus on that, and continue with your emailing and your texting, and even some occasional telephone calls.
Yeah, or the map, right, to find your way in New York City.
Oh, the
right?
map. Yeah. Well, that's one of the, and of course, the fact that we have the GPS now. Is that people can't read a map anymore. People can't get lost. People get lost so easily. I even get lost. I was going someplace yesterday, which was really I've been to before in Bethesda, and I'm thinking, how do I get there? Let me see, where do I go? And finally, I just put it into my car's, GPS, and it's like, I can't believe this. But the same thing is that when the earlier calculators came out,
Yeah.
all of a sudden people no longer could do times tables in their head. They couldn't. I can't add and subtract anymore without using my fingers. I have what's called calculator atrophy. And so the electronic calculators have sort of wiped the ability to do arithmetic from my brain. And it's like, on
Wow.
one hand, you could say, well, that's good. Well, I don't need to. I can always go look at my calculator find the answer, etc. So the other question is: are these devices, are they beneficial because they're offloading so much stuff and it's freeing our brains up, or are they just overloading us?
Well,
Yeah.
and what about on that side? What about the idea that the Google effect allows us to actually have more cognitive space for storing other things, or for curiosity into other things? We don't have to remember,
But what's
what.
the evidence? What's the evidence that people are more curious, or that they're storing more things away? They're not, because they're gorging on TikTok and similar things. This is why I say, when I talk about connecting the dots, is that younger people don't have any dots to connect. They don't read. They don't know geography and geohistory, political history around the world. I mean, these pro-Palestinian demonstrations in the colleges and all this, chanting these slogans, is like, they have no idea what they're talking about. They're just mindlessly parroting this stuff. And you ask them about the Abraham Accords. It's like, what's that? You say, well, President Clinton offered Palestine as a state, and Arafat rejected it. It's like, oh, really? I didn't know. Yeah, I know you didn't know it, because you don't know anything.
Yeah.
You're so busy with the latest fads.
Which
I sound like a curmudgeon. I really do.
No.
but this is the interesting piece about this, because I think as we're talking about this, as you mentioned, I mean, it's not that there's necessarily that this is evil incarnate. There's good uses and tools, but it is this aspect of how it does change our brain, how it does change the way that we interact with the world. And you highlight this in the book. You talk about some of the negative aspects of too much screen time, of all this, given how we've evolved the way we have. And particular, you talk about the negative aspect for children, and how that can help in how their brains are wired and various different things. And you talk about a number of things: brain energy. You talk about the blue light that interrupts sleep. You talk about decline of empathy in kids, the lack of reading. It goes on and on. You have a long list. And so I'm going to be the horrible person and ask, to pick your favorite child. Is there one of those negative impacts that you think we should be most concerned about? Or is it just the weight of all of them that comes down?
I'm tempted to say, put the screen away as much as possible, but they're surrounded by so many other people's screens. Silicon Valley types, they now have their nannies sign non-disclosure agreements that they will not use their screens in front of their children, and if they do, they'll be fired. So, I mean, what do these executives know that they're not telling the rest of America's parents? Okay,
Yeah.
but so that's one thing, but the other is, I would say, socialization and imagination. Aristotle said man is a political animal, meaning not that we're interested in matters of state, but that we live in a polis, a city of a collection of individuals, right? And so we socialize, and that's what the brain is meant to do. That's when I opened the book with a scenario from 3 million BC with this small collection of early humans waking up in the morning and going to hunt and gather. and they number just, two or three dozen at the most. They know each other. Everybody has a role to play. It's collective, it's harmonious, etc. And babies are social animals. The most fascinating thing to a newborn is another human face.
Yeah.
And every parent and grandparent knows this. They lock onto the face, their pupils dilate, they coo and giggle, and they're happy. And so when you take an iPad and stick it over their bassinet or the back of their car seat and all that, you are obstructing the developing central vision of a young person. A baby starts out with vision of 2400. They're essentially blind. And then by the age of around 4 months, color vision has developed. And then after that, their acuity improves over time. But that's why I said that the iPad is the worst babysitter of all time. I know parents say it's the only thing that calms them down, and that may be true for a while, but the screen talks at a child. It doesn't talk with them the way a parent or a grandparent might. It doesn't play games like patty cake and so big, or when kids get older, more imaginative games like restaurant or shoe store, things like that, which take some imagination. I mean, one of my grandnephews just loved the idea of cooking, so they gave him this toy kitchen and all that, and he just invented. The restaurant. I'm your maitre d'. Here's the menu. Here's what's on the course. I mean, it was all in his head. It's the same way that right. An empty cardboard box can become a fire engine. So one of the things is, and this is what my co-author Barbara Billman came up with. She's talking to her grandchildren, and she said, these younger kids don't have any imagination. Everything is just given to you. Whereas, she'll start a story and then say, and what do you think happens next? Or what do you think the character said? Or what were they thinking of at that point? And so the grandchild has got to come up with an answer, right? Yeah. Which is not given to them on a screen,
right. And they do, right?
And they do, yeah. Yes. Wow. So give it enough time. I remember there's a picture in the book of this generations ago when radios used to be big pieces of furniture, and kids would. I've actually have contemporary people who they would lay underneath it when the Lone Ranger or whatever came on, and they would imagine the entire episode as they were narrating it on the radio. They'd see it in their mind. These are great exercises in imagination. So I would say socialization and imagination. Those are the two big that I would pick on. And then the third would be for everybody, no matter your age, is go to bed. You make sure you get, I tell this to my medical students. I said, you want to get the most bang for your buck? Go to bed. Yeah. And I give a little PowerPoint thing showing the architecture of sleep. And we evolved on a rotating planet that has light and dark. And this sets our clock every day. And if you stay up late, you ruin the architecture where you're not getting the deepest sleep. So if you have to do something like give a presentation or take a test or whatever, set an alarm clock to get up early, an hour or two early. And that's when you do your studying or your cramming, not at the end of it. So you want to front load and get that deep restorative stage 3 and 4 sleep plus REM sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those. I've cheated. So I've given 3 things. So imagination.
That's perfect.
Take away the screen. A socialization, and go to bed.
Well, one of the things you talk about a lot in the book, which I found really fascinating, was brain energy, and just this idea of how much energy our brain consumes. And the amount that then, screen time or others take away from that. Can you talk a little bit about brain energy and
Sure.
talk, I love the analogy of a light bulb and how much energy that takes, and then all the other pieces that you have. So,
well, I think in engineering terms of what is the energy cost of a certain operation. And again, that's consequence of my profession that I think this way, and most people would never think this way. Even engineers don't think this way when they're thinking about the brain. But the brain is an energy hog. It consumes 20% of the calories that we ingest every day, but it only accounts for 2% of the body's weight. And most of the energy that it consumes is, and let me say, a toddler takes 50%, and an infant takes 60%. So that's an awful lot. So when they're sleeping there like an angel, their brain is very busy reorganizing itself. It's working. It's doing a lot of work, even though on the outside they look sweet and placid. So most of this energy, let's take in adults like us, goes towards maintaining the physical structure. That is by pumping sodium and potassium ions across membranes to keep up the physical structure of the brain. And this leaves very little left over for thought, which is what everybody is interested in. Okay, so we have a very slim buffer to work with, which is why multitasking is a fool's energy. Fool's errand. We just can't do two things at once. The other thing is that our working memory is a big bottleneck. Working memory is like the little cauldron where everything at the moment is being operated on. Okay, and our working memory is limited in what it can hold at once. And if you try to tax it by asking it to do too many things, you end up with flaws and errors. The great example of this is the Oscar fiasco, where they named the wrong Best Picture. Yeah. And why did that happen? Is because there were two presenters on either side of the stage with their envelopes lined up. And Andrew Cunanan from PricewaterhouseCoopers was tweeting about Emma Stone as she left the stage, the exact moment that he should have been throwing away the envelope and queuing up the next one. And so his working memory, how easy is that, you say, right? Except his working memory couldn't keep track of these two things. And so there was this huge flub, broadcast in front of millions of people. And it ended up funny. I mean, it wasn't anything of great consequence, but I do give examples in the book of some medical errors being made because of these distractions. Right. And the question is, doctors have been distracted for decades. We faced all kinds of distractions, but there's something different about the screen and the phone that we did not have to contend with the beeper on our belt, for example, or the page operator paging all the time. They didn't distract us.
Yeah. Hey, this is Kurt, and we want to say thanks for listening to Behavioral Grooves. And we hope that you're enjoying this episode, but it feels a little bit one-sided. You're hearing from us, but we're not hearing from you.
This is Tim, and we have two suggestions to remedy that. The first is join our Facebook page and engage with us.
We want to talk with you. We want to hear your perspectives, and hopefully our Facebook page might be the place to have some of that interaction. So please come and join us.
The other recommendation we have for you is to leave us a quick rating. The little 5-star thing at the bottom of your app, or a short review. Just leave us a few words about what you like about Behavioral Grooves. We'd very much appreciate it.
Thanks, and we now return you to our regularly scheduled programming.
You use some really wonderful musical terms in the book, which I found really interesting, like Caesura.
Caesura, yes.
You even end the book with coda. I was like, how perfect is that? Like, that was just so great. Well, first of all, why did you go there with those? But tell and then second, can you tell our listeners sort of the importance of Caesura and why they should be thinking about why that term should be something that they should integrate.
I think
into
that
their
relates
lives.
to my theme of silence being an essential nutrient. It says hero, the dot with this curve over it, is a musical term either for a singer, where the singer takes a breath, or where in musical, the music comes to a pause, a long pause, and then resumes. So it's like the brain cannot go 24/7 nonstop. that's not how we're not wired that way. Look at our early ancient ancestors. They lived in an environment where not much changed except the seasons and the position of the stars overhead. Um, Nature, the color palette of nature is fairly muted. There's not a lot of variation in it, except during the fall when the leaves turn color. All right. Or when there's a dramatic sunset, it's orange or pink, So there's not a lot of variation in the natural world, both visually and in terms of soundscape, and just in terms of experience. Most of the natural world was founded on social interactions. So that's why I say silence is an essential nutrient, because we're asking our brain to go nonstop. We're scrolling through, we're doom scrolling nonstop, and people realize, oh my God, I've just spent an hour and a half on scrolling, and where did the time go?
Yeah.
And so we need that caesura, we need that pause to sort of what I call throw the circuit breaker and stop this nonstop thinking and obsessive reaction. What was I going to say? So you can do what the Dutch call niksen, which means doing nothing. And so to take a pause, look out the window, look at the trees, look at the clouds, look at the birds, and you only have to do this for 20, 30 seconds. I mean, that's enough to just stop. There's a monk, a Buddhist monk, who says everybody complains, I don't have time to meditate. I'm too busy. He said, well, everybody has a place where you put your car keys. So when you do that, you have a little stick of incense there. You don't even have to light it, and you just hold it to your forehead as you get your keys and say, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha, homage to the Buddha. And there, you've just meditated for 15 seconds. And that's enough to get your day going. You've lowered that anxiety level. You've lowered the levels of cortisol and epinephrine in your bloodstream. And that's a good thing, as Martha Stewart might say.
Music can help that too, right? Music is a good interruptive,
Yes, it can be soothing. It depends what kind of music. I mean, if you're listening to acid rock, I don't know about that. Although, music is good. In my own example, I can listen to the opera, for example, particularly the Saturday broadcast. But if it's in German, which is language I understand, then it's my attention is pulled over in that way. And then there's music that I think, like Olivier Messiaen, the Turangalila Symphony. If you walked into the room and you heard that, you would say, oh my God, what a cacophony that is. But to me, I'm used to all these dissonances and assonances and strange sounds. And so to me, I can hum along to it. And it sounds, it's familiar. I like it. So
you probably don't listen to music when you're working then, do you?
It depends. Often I forget to do it, so I'm so busy. I'm so absorbed. But sometimes, yes. I have all my CDs ripped onto the hard drive, or else I can do my Sonos, pick a radio station and all that. And like there's a classical station in Washington D.C., another one in Baltimore, and they're pretty good because they don't interrupt things to talk very much. They just play the music, and I can turn the volume down, and so there's just this nice wave in the background, which is relaxing.
Well,
if I was trying to listen to, let's say, hip hop or rap, I couldn't, because I don't like that stuff. I'm sorry, but I'm used. I'm old fashioned. I like classical music.
Yeah.
It's what I was trained on. It's what I played on the piano. Although I did do progressive jazz for a while. I studied with a well-known jazz pianist. So I could sound just like a cocktail lounge lounge lizard. It was great. I can't believe I'm doing this. This is really wonderful. Oh,
As a physician, I love it.
Tim is going to definitely want to dig into that, but I do want to. You talk about this background piece, and you brought up in the book this study by the Rensselaer Polytech Institute, I believe, where it was the people were performed better on tests when there was a babbling brook playing in the background.
mhm.
And so, is music? Can music be that babbling brook, or is the babbling brook something specific from your understanding?
Well, the babbling brook is basically white noise. Okay,
Okay.
it's a sound that's not carrying any sort of meaning to it, other than nature. There's a natural brook outside my window, which is nice.
Yeah.
I have a fountain in my courtyard, which when I open my office window in the summer, I can hear it splashing, and
Yeah.
that's very, very nice. So yes, that can be the babbling brook, and it can also be. It doesn't have to be uh, totally without meaning,
Right.
because music does have an emotional weight to it. So it can be something that you like. It could be a song, folk songs, lyric, whatever.
Okay.
So I
So
mean, I can listen to Jesse Norman sing Strauss's four last songs, and I know the German, but they're so they're they're not so much focused on the sound, on the words, as on the articulation of the sound and how it flows and weaves around you, just like Mahler, or Das Lied from der Erde, for example. And it just it's such an emotional gravity to it, and a release. And I think, and we need these kinds of releases. It's like a massage for the soul, in a way. I like
was
that.
I think that massage of the soul is a hot term.
A
That's
massage for the soul. Yes.
so. Let's say you're on a desert island for a year and you only get to take two musical artist catalogs with you. Who do you narrow it down to?
Oh my God. Well, I would do Richard Strauss, uh, because it was varied, and a lot of his works were very long. so so that's, I mean, I don't want to, 3 minutes of the ink spots, then the song's done. So Richard Strauss. Who
When you
else
get
would
the
I
whole
take?
catalog, it wouldn't just be one piece. I mean,
No, yes, but
yeah,
and he had a fairly good output, between symphonies and operas and
yeah.
orchestral pieces and songs. So yeah, I think that'd be nice. Um, oh, the second one. Well, I'd really have to think a little bit harder about that. I think it would be Mozart, only because
Oh,
if I'm on a desert island and I'm limited, well, who do I want? I would do Mozart, I think, because again, of the just huge
yeah.
uh,
Tremendous
volume
library
of
of
of his library, of his output.
yeah, and
Yeah.
variety as well.
Yeah, I mean, there would be some jazz pianists that I would like to include. Beat Adair, for example. I like her style very much. Um, so we'll see, but I'm limited to two. So maybe, yeah, one classical, one jazz. That would be sort of nice. And I think
Variety seeking.
classical and jazz go so well; they complement one another, I think, very, very well. And you'll find that a lot of people who are aficionados of classical music also like jazz, uh,
Yeah.
and not just the bebop or the melodic swing kind of things, but even the where you have drum solos and whatnot. It's
Yeah.
there's a lot of things to like about it.
I love seeing your face on the drum solo.
It's not my thing, but it's okay.
Got it. Yeah.
But it's part of what, every quartet, if they're going to take a round for 16 bars, then you're going to have a piano solo, a horn solo, the
That's it.
drum solo. I mean, it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
That
Have you
form is prevalent. Yeah.
have either of you seen Whiplash, the movie? It's about the
No.
jazz drummer. Oh, it's a
No.
fascinating. It's
Hey,
a
this it
make
sound
believe,
it,
but
this is
but
is this a current one or a
yeah, it's a
old one?
current one. It's relatively new. I
All
would
right, the
suggest
title
it.
is familiar, but no, I haven't seen
Yeah,
it. I haven't
Whiplash.
watched TV and Netflix for the past 3 months. I only just started after I got home from the artist colony this time, just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I have a whole sheet of things that I've typed up of things to see.
Put
things
that
to
on the
watch.
bottom of that list, and there you go. Because
Okay, and Whiplash. It could be on there already. I don't know.
From a jazz drummer perspective, you might get a different perspective of just maybe a little bit of a shift
all right.
in how you.
I'm game. Sure.
Yeah. So
I always aim to be educated.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that as we started off, and I know we're running here at time, but I as you said, your job of being able to study the human brain and to understand it, I think is just one of the most fascinating things. It's the piece that I think both Tim and I love. If you had to leave our listeners with one kind of here's something to take away, what would that one takeaway be? As we think about that.
Besides go to bed, right?
Besides go to bed. You already said to go to bed.
I've already
this
said
is your
that.
second musical catalog that you get to do for our listeners. Here it is.
Develop emotional intelligence. And this is a learnable skill, actually. And it involves several pieces to it. The first is self-awareness, is becoming aware of how you're thinking. Let's say you're angry or you're upset. And so instead of just flying off the handle, stop and say, that's Caesura. Stop and say, why am I upset? Why is my heart pounding? What happened that's making me feel this way? Then if you answer that question, you'll start to understand the triggers. And the triggers usually aren't rational things. So we become more aware of our thinking. And for most people, thinking about thinking just seems sort of weird. But again, as I say, it's my profession. So, but you can learn to do this. It's easy. If you can do yoga and if you can do meditation, you can develop emotional intelligence. The second part would be emotional regulation. So controlling how you respond, staying calm, responding effectively under pressure instead of just reacting. And if you do this, you'll find out that you start to have more empathy for other people's points of view. One of the surprising things is that other people know things too. You're not the know-it-all. And so, and they have, like, the synesthesia shows, even, young children are doing book reports about this. And it's like, oh, other people see the world differently than the way I do. And then by extension, they're thinking, oh, other people think differently than the way I do. And so if we can use this approach in saying our political discourse that, oh, the other side is evil and stupid, and this invective is not useful whatsoever. It gets nowhere. So when you do then, so we have the empathy is developing, and with that, then your social skills of learning how to interact with other people. This is one of the things I think that digital devices have really eaten away at, is the ability to socialize with one another. Young people don't know how to make small talk. I see this even in my medical students. They go to the security blanket of their iPad right away.
Yeah.
But practice. I just came back from an artist colony, the Virginia Center for Creative Arts. I'll give it a plug. It's in the Appalachian foothills in Amherst, Virginia, and that's a rural country. And so all these artists, visual artists, composers, and writers, they're coming from New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta. They're big city people, and it shocks them that you actually talk to people there. Is that you go to the food line to get your wine, and the checkout lady is going to talk to you. You go you go to pump gas, and it's like, hey, how are you doing? That's like, and you're expected to talk back with them and have a conversation. It's quite something.
Yeah. It's interesting too, when you talk about at the very beginning of this, you're talking about how, when we can slow down and access, like, why am I angry? Why am I different pieces? In the book, you talked about how quickly our brains work from an emotional response versus that rational response. And
Mhm.
I think you said like 200 milliseconds or something faster. I can't remember exactly what that was, but
Yes,
it doesn't seem
different
like a
skills
lot,
arrive
but
at different speeds and in the brain. So this is the binding problem of how do all these things come together when they're operating at different speeds, different time scales.
yeah. But I mean, again, it's just fascinating if you understand that, hey, I'm going to have that emotional response first, but it might not be rational. And so to be able to just stop yourself, to slow down, to
Mm.
look at that, to understand and try to figure out what are the triggers? Are those triggers real? Are they rational? Do I,
Well,
it's a big
emotion has
beast.
has a reason of its own.
Yeah.
So if you're, one of the might be that. Oh, the FOMO is that I'm afraid of being abandoned. That's
Mm,
why I feel like if I'm missing out, that I'm not being included, and that gets back to abandonment issues that you might have had as a child. It's like, whoa, these things stick with you for a long time, don't they?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, decades through your entire life, and you just have to learn to roll with them. But at the end of all this, these things that I've talked about, the self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, improving your social skills, is that you develop resilience, which is one of the best skills on earth to have. And resilience means that bad things happen. I know they're going to happen. They've happened in the past. They're going to happen in the future. And I've gotten through it in the past, which means when something comes up, it's like, oh, I've seen this before. I can handle it, etc. And it may be disappointing, and I may be knocked down for half a day or a day, but I pick myself back up and go at it again.
Yeah.
That's just what we do. I think being a writer helps too in this, because you have to be able to deal with rejection, and you get rejection. I'm sorry, this isn't for us. Okay, and you think, oh no, my brilliant work, etc. And it's like, well, David Dobbs, the science writer, he submits a piece, and he already has 5 other places that he's going to send it for backup in case the first one doesn't go through. So he's already thought through the potential rejections, and so you just tick that box. Okay, send it to location number 2. Let's see what they say. And meanwhile, he's working on the next article, so there's always something fresh in the hopper. Uh,
Yeah.
which is what I've done all my life. I've always, if you have 10 irons in the fire at once, and know that only 2 or 3 are going to come to fruition, then you've always got something good happening all the time.
I love that. That's great, and I think we should. Out of respect for your time, at the very least,
My time is yours.
well, let us say a very deep felt thank you to you for being a guest on Behavioral Grooves today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion with Richard, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our brains that are taking these sounds and making them shapes, or making these, smells that we have into feelings, or taking your words and just making them a mess, brains.
Wow, that's a mouthful. That's good. I mean, I get the gist of it. I get the gist of it, because synesthesia is cool.
The synesthesia stuff. Yeah.
So it's cool for me because I don't have it. Like I'm attracted
I don't
to
have
the
it
idea.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also don't have what you have. Like I can remember images and places and
I
when
can
you say
remember
elephant,
images and faces. I just can't picture them in my brain. I mean, it's not like I don't have memory of things. I can't
No,
describe them,
I didn't mean
which
to
is a
say
really
that.
interesting fact, right? So how do people with aphantasia like I have, which is where if I close my eyes and you ask me to picture a horse, it's pretty much blank. I don't see a horse. I don't
Yeah.
see. If you ask me to picture what was the house that you had, I can't visualize that like I think most people can, but I can describe a horse to you. I can describe a house
Yeah.
to you. I can describe what my car looks like. I can do all of those things. And it's a really interesting, and I
Yeah.
contemplate this way too much because I obviously have it and it's me search and all that kind of fun stuff. But
Well,
yeah,
but to some degree, are you kind of curious about what synesthesia would be like? Like when you, like for me, like the idea of listening to music and then being able to taste something or feel some sense, I mean, I feel something, but I don't know if that's emotion versus actually a tactile, sensory
you're
kind
not
of thing.
feeling like somebody brushing your arm,
Yeah,
right? When
no.
you're feeling a tingling sensation, but it's not the yeah.
Yeah.
I I think it's, to a certain degree when I first heard about this, it was like, oh, that could be kind of cool. You could, could hear red, you could,
Yeah.
hear blue, and different notes are different colors. And then I'm like, going, that would freak me out though, I think. I mean, think about if
Yeah.
it came on later
Yeah.
in life and you hadn't been born with it. That would be really interesting.
Oh, so if you lived your life without it and then you had
Like,
it,
say you knocked your brain against something and,
I do that all the
knocked some
time.
things in there, and all of a sudden you could see music, right? The notes would be
In
colors,
colors.
or
Yeah.
yeah. Think
Or
about
I
how that would
taste it.
change, like how you're playing, like how you listen
Yeah.
to music.
It's kind of wild.
Mm.
I don't know. I haven't spent enough time trying to dive into it, and I don't know anybody with it.
Yeah, I
Or at
don't.
least it was ever
At least I
told me.
don't. Nobody has made it public
Yeah.
knowledge, and they might,
Yeah.
with 4% of the population, that's I mean, we probably know somebody with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I
Probably.
mean, that's just, but I mean, I don't bring up my aphantasia every time I talk with somebody. There's very few
Yeah.
people, unless you listen to this podcast, right, that know it.
So
Um,
thousands and thousands of people around the whole world know, but your friends down the block might not know.
well, of course, because my friends would never listen to this damn show. Good. Why would I want to listen to you, Kurt? God, you're an idiot. All right, but with that, let's move on. Let's move on to
Yes.
Richard's other conversation and his book. So
Yes.
his book was scary to me, Tim, um,
Yeah.
because it
It,
is this idea. I mean, the big picture premise of we have a brain that has not been evolved to live in the world, and that causes a lot of problems. Our current world, not it has evolved to
right.
live in the world,
That's
just
right.
not the
That's right.
current technological digital world that we are growing up in. It
Well, and
reminded me. It reminded me. I read a book called The Shallows, and I'm forgetting the author's name, that talked about how digital and our interaction with the digital world is rewiring our brain as a kid, and what that
yeah.
means for people moving forward. And I think that is also a very scary thought. So
Yeah, it reminded me of The Good Life. There's a comment in The Good Life by Bob Waldinger and Mark Schultz, which is why I grabbed it, where they say, and I'm paraphrasing, the world doesn't care that if we get addicted to screens.
no,
It just doesn't care. But it matters a lot to us as individuals. And
yes,
and in that way, Richard's book is a bit of a doomsday book because like people just keep creating stuff, and this is in the classic because we can, is it really a good idea? And
yeah. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I think there's a lot
exactly.
of that in this book and different things.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
should we keep going down our doomsday, sad, make
No,
everybody depressed kind of thing? Should we do
I'm
that?
already depressed, so so I'm already there. But I do want to say that I liked his comment, and it's a great reminder that our brain is a calorie hog,
Oh,
right? That this is a
yeah.
good thing to just keep in mind, that it's a precious resource for our body.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to feed it, the part of me came away with thinking, let's feed it good stuff. Let's let's let the calories be burned on something that's worthwhile. If you're going to spend calories on Oreos, that's not quite as good as on spinach or arugula.
So you're saying we should spend our brain calories on like behavioral grooves and not on, like doom scrolling down and seeing what the latest administration craziness is, right?
Yeah. That's I wouldn't have inserted behavioral grooves there, but yeah, sure. Yes.
Why you're because you don't want to put behavioral grooves like spinach. You want it to be more like Oreos. Is that what you're saying?
I'd like us to be like really tasty spinach, like really delicious.
Yeah, no, come
spinach.
on. No. We have to be healthy Oreos is what we have to be. like ice cream that is
Has
good
spinach.
For us. Yeah, spinach ice cream.
Ice cream.
Oh God, we are way gone. Yeah, no, but the brain energy, I think, is something we've talked about before. It's a well-known fact. 20+%, and
Right.
Richard was really interesting. Is like as some of the insights in about. As a toddler, as a kid, it's even more the amount of energy that the brain uses. And so when we are thinking about that, right, we have a limited cognitive bandwidth for tasks. It's like it's already using up so much energy. You can't push any more. We get this memory bottleneck that he talked about, right? We have this whole component there. And there's real world consequences that happen from that. This idea of, I don't know why anybody would believe that multitasking is still real.
Shoots, he scores. Yes. You just kicked a 64-yard field goal on that one. Yes.
Oh, I wish I could. That'd be great. I could be rich if I could kick a 64-year-old.
But that's it. Like this is a great myth that continues to get perpetrated that, I get so tired from multitasking. Well, of course, because there's these switching costs in your brain and you're actually not even multitasking. You're not. No one is multitasking.
But this is the thing, is I think that people go, but I can do 2 or 3 things at once. And I do that. The fact of the matter is, though, is that your brain, to what you're saying, is switching. It is doing this component where your brain isn't splitting itself and half of it's working on, writing your resume, and the other half is, listening to, this YouTube thing. It doesn't work that way. It stops on one and goes to the other. Now it's really quick. And so we don't necessarily, it's happening at such a pace that in the real world, it feels like it. But because of that switch, as you said, it is taking time to stop and then restart. And so if you think about like a car, when you stop and restart a car, it's harder on the engine. It takes more energy. It takes more gasoline to start the car.
It burns more fuel. Absolutely.
To do that. So it's an ineffective way. Yes, you could in the real world be working on multiple tasks, but your brain is paying the price for that.
Yeah, which is different. We've talked about the Zeigarnik effect in the past, and there is value in starting something and getting some work done on it, and then going and doing something else, and letting your unconscious brain actually sift through some of that first task, because your unconscious brain will continue to work on something if you kind of prime it in that way, and then come back to that original task later. And you'll be in a different place. You'll have a different cognitive understanding.
It does that in those downtimes. It does that in those moments where we're not doing anything, right? That's when it is. When you're starting to fall asleep, even potentially when you're sleeping. We don't know all of that, right? So there's this component, too, of having our brain be such an energy hog that you need to give it breaks. And, we've talked about this in a lot of the journals that we're creating, and in some of that work that I do on the side. So the daily shift or the brain shift work, we talk about doing brain breaks, and this idea that you need to give your brain a break during the day because it consumes all that energy and it does wear out. And you come back from, and a lot of people go, well, I can't take a break. I have too much to do. I have to get this done. actually, if it's a brain intensive component, taking that break allows your brain to recharge, rejuvenate, and you come back. And to your point, it lets the unconscious do some of the work. So
I think there's an interesting little segue here, and I'm just going to jump to Richard talked about the importance of boredom in our lives and its relationship
yes.
to creativity, right? Like there's a really wonderful relationship, a positive relationship between getting bored and being creative, right? And for me, this is the was it Johann Huizinga's book from the 1930s about Homo ludens, like the playful animal. The playful animal needs to play, 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 and then rest, rest, rest. Like you have to do both in order to sort of have a good life. We have these rhythms that we go through of being active and then being bored. And that stimulates, ironically, creativity, right?
Okay. I love the fact that you bring in a book from the 1930s and Homo ludens, which is like fantastic. You must have taken a break and like relaxed, and it allowed that creativity to go.
It was our good buddy Adam Hansen. Actually, just a shout out to Adam Hansen for recommending the book to me a few years ago. So
it's a fantastic insight, and I think there's actually. This boredom piece is something that I have just embraced. This idea that we try to fill too much of our day. You can't stand in line without pulling your phone out, even if it's going to be 15 seconds. My daughter, who like we're riding in the car and it's going to be a 2-minute car ride, has to get on and put their music on.
And how long are the two of you in the car?
A couple minutes.
A couple of minutes. Yeah.
Can't ride in silence. We can't, just have that moment. Not saying we can't, right? But that's not their typical modus operatus. They want to have that piece. Again, my kids are horrible. And I think many kids today watching a movie, they have their phone open and they're playing a game while they're watching that movie because there might be a scene where it doesn't have any conversation in it and it's showing the scenery for a whole 3-4 seconds. And oh my God, I can go down and I can play the game. I don't get that. I don't understand this idea that constant stimulation. I think we've really, this is a part that I think Richard is bringing up, is that that's not how our brains have evolved to be. Exactly. It's like we've been, it's our taste buds have evolved to like sweets and fats and different pieces, and that's because it
keeps us alive.
That's fine when those are limited in nature, and when you get them, they help you because they have more calories and different things. And so, in those times of famine, you are a little bit more likely to survive. Right. Our brains are looking for that stimulation, various different things. But when it becomes a fire hose, when that is a constant, because we consume, the amount of information, I read this somewhere, 174 newspapers a day now, where in the 1980s it was, about 50, the amount of information we get. And that, the amount of information that we get in like a day or 2 days is what a educated person would have had in their entire life back in, the 800s or 1200s of the world.
Yeah.
We are being force fed so much information, and our brains have to comprehend it and to deal with it. And it's crazy.
It reminds me of a comment that Richard made when he said that social media is not social at all. There's nothing social about it, right? Like, we're kind of sold this bill of goods that we get lost on. And then I go back to Waldinger and Schultz. The world doesn't care. The world just doesn't care if we get misguided.
Let me read that actual quote, right? So that Richard said, It's such an here's what he said. It's such an oxymoron of social media. There is absolutely nothing social about it. It separates people. It isolates them. It makes them feel lonely. It makes them, anxious over FOMO, fear of missing out. So think on the whole, they are a net loser. So I think on the whole, they are a net loser.
So did you just turn the doomsday machine back on with that?
I just think it's really important is that it is an oxymoron that the way that we use social media, and this is the piece, is it's like it gives us little patches of connection, but the vast majority is not, right? The vast majority of social media is peacocking, kind of putting out, here are my feathers, look at me, how great I am. It's not about a conversation. It is a way of gathering eyeballs onto you, or if you're scrolling to look and see all of the different ways that people are doing it, you're not having a conversation.
Right.
You're not having a connection.
Because all that digital screen interaction is not the same as face to face. We don't have all that sensory experience of space and time when we're on a screen. We're hardwired. Talk about our genetic evolutionary selves. We're hardwired for this, for sitting in the same room across from each other, not actually having this on a digital call.
Right.
That our brains aren't really. I mean, we've adapted. We've figured out how to do it, but that doesn't mean that we're well adapted for it.
Well, and we all know. I mean, I think we all know that person who we know in real life who is just wonderful and kind and nice, and they're like, you get them on a social media platform and they change, and it is a different person, and that's because you don't have that real life connection and that real life interaction where we would never call people the names that they get called in the comments section in social media, that you would never make the gross overgeneralizations that you do. You don't talk that way. You don't interact that way.
Kurt, you don't have to talk about me like I'm not here. Okay.
It's interesting. The other thing I thought was really interesting that Richard brought up is that we don't know when to stop. Right.
Oh, on the doom scrolling thing?
On any of that social. The digital world it is the ice cream of our world. It's like, I don't know when to stop on ice cream, and I don't think we know. But actually, that's not true, right?
Yeah,
I
you
get
do.
to a certain point at ice cream, and I can't eat another. I can't eat another bite, and I've overate ice cream. But at least even then, I do get a signal to stop.
But I remember early behavioral economists talking about the marginal utility of chocolate. Like the first bite of the chocolate bar is fantastic, and the second bite's really, really good. But if you got to 50 bites or 100 bites or 200 bites, it's like, ugh, right? Our body naturally turns that off. It says, whoop, that's enough. That we don't need any more of that. But we don't have that shutoff valve when it comes to digital media. That's a problem. Okay. Well, I just wanted
So with that though, we need to be able to set some way to stop that, right?
And how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we do it?
So, there are a number of those timers out there that you can, on your watch, on your phone, or you can buy the little ones that you put in front of you that are a countdown. So, all right, I know I need to go onto social media, or I want to go onto social media. But what I need is a stop. I need a signal that's going to do it. So set alarms, set a timer, something to remind you to get off that damn phone. Use when then statements. When I scroll onto, Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, whatever it is, I will set a timer. And by doing that, you're more likely to have that stop.
That's good tips. I just want to say one thing he also talked about emotional intelligence and resilience. And I felt like sort of the underlying story there is about self-awareness
Mhm.
as a learnable skill. And I know that there's a lot of people who are like, I don't really care about what other people think about me. I'm blah, blah, blah. I'm hyper independent and I just do my own thing. It's like, we're social beings. We thrive by getting along. And one of the key ways that we get along is having some self-awareness about how we affect other people. And if we get out of touch with that, it's a learnable skill and we can get back in touch with. We can actually take some time to reflect. There's a whole bunch of tools out there that you can use to take tests to say how relatable are you. All that kind of stuff makes a difference in how we get along in the world, and I think ultimately leading to our happiness and well-being.
Well, the number one reason why people are considered good leaders is that they can relate to the people that they work with.
There you go.
That
There you go.
right there, is a big piece of this. And so to your point, lots of tools out there, lots of different resources you can do. I think for, the one piece is just pay attention. Pay attention to you and what's going on with you, and pay attention to what's going on with others in your world. We too often are on autopilot and we just let it go. And
Yeah.
this is a way of look people in the face, watch how they respond. Don't be scrolling on your phone and having a conversation with your kid,
Right. Right.
Put the phones down at dinner,
And it's
right?
not that we don't have biases. It's not that we're going to get tripped up by stuff, right, in the world. But I remember Danny Kahneman having this wonderful comment about how all that he knows, all of his research about our biases and the heuristics that we use for decision making, he can't just overcome them just by sheer will and motivation. But by changing his environment, he can influence how they impact him.
Yeah.
And so if you're struggling with this, change your environment, change the world that you live in. Make little adjustments to things. Like your story, your Oreo story. You love Oreos. You
Yeah.
especially love them in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And they would be easy to get to if they were in the kitchen. But where do you keep them?
And then put them down in the basement. Now, it doesn't stop me from way too often going down and getting them, but it's a less than I would normally. And to your point, the environment, right? Put up, notes to yourself that are going to remind you to pay attention to other people, to have some of that. There's a big chalkboard down in our kitchen that is an old school kind of chalkboard, has the little chalk tray on the bottom of it and wood frame and has a crack through it. It's so old and different things. But I write these in what I think are inspiring messages. Lord knows if my kids do or my wife does. But they are for me to a certain degree, but also for the family. But it's like I write things like, pay attention, the world moves fast, right? Those are things that go up there. I write, slow down, it's time to, actually smell a rose, right? Those kinds of things that go up on that. And all right, after a while, it just becomes background in our house. But there are points where you look at that and, okay, now it's the environment. The environment is reminding me that I need to slow down. The environment is set up. So, yeah.
Or priming you, possibly? Or priming your family?
That's part of, as you know, we could do a whole section on priming or various different aspects of that. But with that, Tim, I think we need to wrap it up. We've gone way too long here. So
it's,
I don't know. Maybe we haven't gone to. Maybe we've gone just the right amount of time.
This is exactly this. We just hit the Goldilocks spot. So now we're going to check out.
Go.
And so, Groovers, if you have not checked out our YouTube page, please do so. Please give it a shot. Give it a listen. Give it a look. Give it a subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, as they always say on the YouTube stuff, because it's about algorithms. It's about exposing new people to behavioral grooves. That's really what it's about for us. Is that subscribe button unleashes the algorithms that helps us find new people.
And if you don't want to put up with us for the entirety of what we do, we have lots of shorts out there, under 1 minute
Yes.
kind of clips of us. Usually they're the funny ones, or hopefully they're the insightful ones. And so again, it's a great way of sharing that with others. You can definitely, link to those and get others to just say, hey, these two goofballs out there, they're kind of fun sometimes. So with that, thank you. And we hope that you took something away from our conversation with Richard, and understanding that our, Stone Age brain isn't always the best adapted to our digital world, and to make some changes in order to make that happen as you go out and find your groove this week.